In 1994, James Cameron made a movie so expensive it broke a record that had never existed before. True Lies was the first film in Hollywood history to cost $100 million, and Cameron spent every single cent of it trying to kill Arnold Schwarzenegger. Today we're counting down 10 astonishing facts about True Lies, the film that changed what action movies were allowed to cost. Stick around for number 1, because Cameron's original plan for this film had nothing to do with spies, and everything to do with a teenager named Peter Parker. Before True Lies, the idea of a $100 million movie didn't exist. Not officially, not on paper. Studios had come close. Terminator 2 had reportedly cost somewhere around $90 million, but nobody had crossed that line officially and put it on the record. True Lies did, costing between $100 and $120 million to produce. True Lies was the first film with a production budget of over $100 million. It was a number so outrageous for 1994 that Cameron refused to confirm it publicly. He told reporters he never discuss budgets. He said films should be judged on their goals, not their cost. He said all of this while sitting next to a movie that featured a horse in a hotel elevator, a Harrier jet hovering outside a Miami skyscraper, and the destruction of an actual bridge in the Florida Keys. The studio was sweating, the press was watching, and then the film opened at number 1, ran for months, and grossed over $378 million worldwide, making it the third highest grossing film of 1994 behind The Lion King and Forrest Gump. Cameron spent $100 million and made nearly 4 times that back. The record he set that summer got broken the very next year by Waterworld, which spent more and made less. There is a lesson in there somewhere about the difference between James Cameron and everyone else. We watched True Lies and thought it looked expensive. We had no idea we were watching the moment Hollywood lost its mind about budgets permanently. The horse chase through the hotel is one of the most memorable sequences in True Lies. Arnold Schwarzenegger on horseback, riding through a lobby, into an elevator, up to a rooftop, and then teetering on the edge while a motorcycle circles below. It looks dangerous because it was. More dangerous than any of us watching from a theater seat ever knew. While filming the scene, a camera boom hit the horse and it went crazy, spinning and rearing, not on a controlled soundstage with padding and safety nets below, but near the edge of a genuine 90-foot drop. Schwarzenegger quickly slid off the horse and a stuntman caught him. 1 second in a different direction and the biggest action star on the planet goes over the edge of a rooftop on a live film set. It didn't happen because a stuntman was close enough to grab him in time. Schwarzenegger later said the experience permanently changed how he felt about stunt performers. That the people we never see on screen are the ones who keep the people we do see alive. He wasn't wrong. We watched that rooftop scene and cheered. Arnold was 30 seconds away from something no amount of box office could have fixed. There is a scene in True Lies where Gib tells Harry about the end of his second marriage. His wife left him, he says, and took everything, and he means everything, including, and this is the specific detail that breaks him, the ice cube trays from the freezer. It gets a big laugh every time. It feels like a perfectly calibrated comedy beat. The specificity of the ice cube trays is what makes it land. The reason it's so specific is because it actually happened. The line is a direct reference to Tom Arnold's divorce from Roseanne Barr, which was happening at the same time as filming. She was reported to have taken his ice cube trays when she left. Tom Arnold told James Cameron the story on set, reportedly saying something considerably less printable about what kind of person takes ice cube trays. And Cameron found it so perfectly absurd that he wrote it directly into the film. Cameron thought the line was hilarious and incorporated it into the film. The most quoted throwaway comedy moment in True Lies came from a real man sitting on a film set processing his actual divorce in real time. We laughed at a joke. Tom Arnold was living it. The sequence where Helen is rescued from the roof of a speeding limousine by Harry in a helicopter over the actual 7-mile bridge in the Florida Keys is one of the most spectacular practical stunts of the entire decade. Stuntwoman Donna Keegan performed the most dangerous moments, including the final pull from the car roof just before it launched off the damaged bridge into the water below. But the overhead shot, the wide aerial angle showing the full rescue from above, required the actual actress. In order to get the shot, Jamie Lee Curtis was wired to a helicopter at base camp and then flew for 20 minutes over the water to reach the 7-mile bridge where the wreckage took place. She was suspended on a wire from the aircraft, dangling above open water over one of the most exposed stretches of highway in Florida, with James Cameron hanging out of the passenger seat holding a camera. Her only requirement before agreeing to go up was that somebody have wire cutters in the helicopter in case they had to ditch over water so she could be separated from it. Wire cutters. scissors. That was the condition. That was the safety plan. This took place just 3 days before her 35th birthday. We watched that shot and called it spectacular. Jamie Lee Curtis was on a wire over the ocean asking someone to please hold the scissors. Arnold Schwarzenegger's opening scene in True Lies is a ballroom tango, smooth, controlled, physically precise, performed in a room full of trained dancers while simultaneously gathering intelligence on a weapons deal. It is the film's most elegant sequence and one of its most unexpected. The man who had spent the previous decade shooting things and crushing things was now dancing beautifully. Schwarzenegger's biggest challenge for the movie was not the physical stunts, but dancing a tango. He had to take dancing lessons to realistically perform the dance and rehearse the scene for about 6 months, which by most standards of film preparation is an almost unreasonable amount of time for a single opening scene. The reason for the obsession was specific. He wanted to make sure he was as good at the tango as Al Pacino was in Scent of a Woman, which used the exact same song. Al Pacino had performed that scene 2 years earlier and owned it completely. Schwarzenegger decided that if he was going to dance to the same music, he was not going to come in second. 6 months of lessons, one song, zero tolerance for being outclassed by Al Pacino. That is a very specific motivation that produced a genuinely great piece of cinema. We watched Arnold Schwarzenegger tango and forgot just for a moment that he was Arnold Schwarzenegger. The scene where Helen performs a striptease for what she believes is a mysterious spy, not knowing she's performing for her own husband, is one of the most memorable moments in Jamie Lee Curtis's entire career. She won a Golden Globe. The scene has been discussed and celebrated for 30 years, and most of what we think we know about how it was made is slightly wrong. Curtis rehearsed the scene extensively with James Cameron, and it was during those rehearsals that the fall she makes in the middle of the dance was conceived. It didn't happen spontaneously during filming as is often claimed. The fall was planned. The stumble was choreographed. What was not planned was Arnold's reaction. Schwarzenegger was not told about the fall beforehand, which is why when it happens, Harry briefly sits up in alarm before realizing he is breaking character and relaxing. That flicker of genuine surprise on Schwarzenegger's face is real. Cameron caught an authentic human reaction inside a controlled scene and kept it. They did another take with the same gag, but Harry's response didn't look as spontaneous the second time. The take we watched is the one where Arnold didn't know what was coming. The bra and panties worn by Helen during the scene were Jamie Lee Curtis's own. That detail alone tells you everything about how committed she was to making that scene feel real. The climax of True Lies involves Arnold Schwarzenegger in the cockpit of a Harrier jump jet, hovering outside a Miami skyscraper, eventually launching a missile with a terrorist riding on it into a helicopter. It is the kind of sequence that in 1994 made audiences genuinely question whether what they were watching was possible. It was, barely. The production used a real decommissioned Harrier jet mounted on a massive hydraulic crane rig, a 7,000-pound aircraft suspended on a single cable, lowered and maneuvered by crane to simulate the jet's movements outside the building. Schwarzenegger was actually sitting in the cockpit for those shots. The Miami skyline in the background was real. The spinning turbines visible in the intake were not CGI. They were tracked footage from an actual Harrier composited in. Cameron later said this sequence was one of the most technically laborious things he had ever done, and that he swore to avoid that kind of composite work in the future. The cockpit itself was so hot from the lighting rigs around it that Schwarzenegger described the heat inside as reaching 100 degrees. He sat in a 7,000-pound fake jet in 100-degree heat, suspended from a crane for weeks, and he did the tango better than Al Pacino. The man was something else. True Lies was successful enough that a sequel was not just discussed, but actively planned. Cameron had ideas. Schwarzenegger was ready. The studio had every financial reason in the world to greenlight it. And then the world changed. Cameron originally planned to make a sequel sometime around 2002, but put his plans on hold once the September 11th attacks occurred, saying terrorism was no longer something to be taken lightly. The entire premise of True Lies, a spy-fighting cartoonish Islamic terrorist with nuclear weapons, had been entertainment in 1994. After September 2001, it was something else entirely. Cameron made the decision publicly and without apparent hesitation. The sequel that most of us assumed was coming simply did not happen because the world the film had played against no longer existed in the same form. Cameron moved on to other projects. Schwarzenegger eventually went to Sacramento. In a later interview, Cameron stated there were no plans for a True Lies sequel, but that he and Schwarzenegger had spoken about possibly working on a new project together once Schwarzenegger left office as governor of California. He left office in 2011. That project never materialized either. We spent years waiting for a sequel to a film whose moment had closed quietly on a Tuesday morning in September 2001. Here is the fact that reframes everything. James Cameron did not intend to make True Lies as his follow-up to Terminator 2. He had a completely different project lined up, one that would have changed the landscape of superhero cinema 20 years before Marvel figured out how to do it properly. Following the massive success of Terminator 2, Cameron set his sights on directing an R-rated version of Spider-Man, with Leonardo DiCaprio in mind to play Peter Parker and Arnold Schwarzenegger to portray Dr. Octopus. TV tropes. Cameron had actually written a treatment for Spider-Man. He was deep in development. Digital Domain, the effects company he co-founded, was already working on what the visuals would look like. And then the right situation surrounding Spider-Man collapsed into a legal dispute between multiple studios that made the film impossible to move forward with. Cameron stepped away. He picked up True Lies instead. We got a spy comedy with a tango and a Harrier jet. What we nearly got was a James Cameron Spider-Man with Leonardo DiCaprio and Arnold Schwarzenegger in the same film, made in 1994, rated R. That version of cinema history is sitting in a parallel universe somewhere, and some version of us is watching it right now. True Lies was not just a movie, it was the proving ground for an entirely new visual effects studio that Cameron had co-founded specifically because no existing company could do what he needed done. True Lies was the first major production for Digital Domain, a visual effects company co-founded by Cameron. He didn't want to rely on Industrial Light and Magic or any other established house. He wanted a company built around his specific vision of what effects could be, one where he had direct access to the people writing the software, where he could ask for entirely new tools to be developed mid-production if the existing ones weren't good enough. Digital Domain was built for this film. The composite shots of the Harrier jet sequence, the bridge explosion, the helicopter sequences over the 7-mile bridge. All of it was processed and realized by a company that had been created essentially to make True Lies look the way Cameron needed it to look. And then Digital Domain kept going. It worked on Apollo 13, on Interview with the Vampire, on Titanic 3 years later, where it helped Cameron win 11 Academy Awards on the same night. The company Cameron built to make one film became one of the most important visual effects houses in the industry. We watched True Lies and thought we were watching the biggest action movie of 1994. We were also watching the origin story of the studio that helped make the highest grossing film in history. Cameron wasn't just making a movie, he was building the future while the cameras were rolling. And there you have it. 10 facts about the film that broke every rule Hollywood had quietly agreed to follow about what movies were allowed to cost. True Lies didn't just entertain us, it changed the industry permanently. Subscribe for more deep dives into the films and moments that raised us. This is Remember When. We'll see you in the next one.